Hello you colonial overlords, this is the HMS Gallant Tier 6 Premium Destroyer by viewer request, and I really did not want to have to do this, but I sold out to Wargaming just a little bit, picked up the Gallant, and yeah, it's alright, I guess. It's not terrible, but the Gallant does have issues, which are really only there because of exactly what the Gallant is. It's a tier 6 premium destroyer, and the problem with that is that tier 6 premiums, obviously, are permanently match-made into tier 8 games, and unlike a tier 8 premium, which tend to be a little bit good because, let's be honest, you're always going to be playing against tier 10, that tends to go for the whole of tier 8 really. Even the standard tech tree ones tend to be a little bit overperforming, but the tier 6s don't really get anything to deal with the fact that they really get the worst bit of the matchmaking. You will face more tier 8s in this than you will in a tier 7. It's stupid. But that's where the Gallant is in the meta, so there's not really much I can do about that. What is the Gallant itself, though? Well, it's a hybrid, I suppose, torpedo gunboat, and it's not really particularly good at either one. You can see there's a Bliskovica and in fact also a Hydra there. Now I'm pretty sure the smokescreen in question is the Hydra smokescreen, but I am going to fire torpedoes anyway. Even though the Hydra has Hydro, maybe it'll push him out of it, you know, we'll see. But the Gallant is not very good at either one of its jobs. The first being, let's talk about the guns. 4 guns at 120mm caliber really aren't all that. And you're really not going to be doing very much with the gun damage unless you're getting particularly lucky or you're engaging something like a Japanese destroyer or really anything that's not, you know, built for gunboating in an even worse way than your own ship, which really isn't built for gunboating. But, you know, that would be okay-ish if the torpedoes stood up and were effectively god tier for tier 6 torpedoes, and they aren't. They're pretty quick. I think they do about 60 knots. I should check the stats, but I can't be bothered. They go about 60 knots, and they have an 8-kilometer range, which is okay. The 8-kilometer range is usable, and certainly something that I got used to, at least, on the Fubuki, when I was running with torpedo acceleration, which of course I do recommend you do on every Japanese destroyer, because they have incredible torpedo detection radius, radii. The torpedoes are seen from ages away, and so you're really going to need that extra boost of speed if you're going to actually hit anything, which you probably still won't do because Japanese torpedoes are trash. But it's disappointing on the Gallant in particular because, well, this isn't a Japanese destroyer, and the torpedoes, they're good-ish, but the Japanese have a very good thing going with their stealth. They're extremely concealed. I think they're the best concealment tier for tier, except for the Hydra. And so they can get into a lot of these positions for torpedo strikes, but the Gallant has a 6-kilometer surface detect, which doesn't really sound like a big deal on the face of it, but then you have to remember, you're going to be playing against a lot of ships. There was some weird glitching out with that Hydra's animation there. You're going to be playing against a lot of ships which are tier 8s, primarily. You will see tier 6s, obviously, but I'm not comparing Gallant directly to the other tier 6s as much because you're going to see tier 8s more often than you do tier 6s. It's really stupid, I know, but that's how Wargaming handles their matchmaker, and they really need to change it. But the problem is that a lot of tier 8 destroyers, you're looking at the Kagero, the Benson, hang on, let me think of another, the Z-23. A lot of them are extremely well concealed. Z-23 not so much, but whatever. They can use the concealment mod. They can obviously take a 10-point captain with concealment expert, like I recommend on the Gallant, but you're going to be facing against a lot of destroyers with better concealment than you, which would be okay if your guns were good. But as we've discussed a second ago, the guns and the torpedoes really, neither one stands up as a primary weapon system in and of itself. They rely on you using both, and you will be constantly using both. Fire the torpedoes on reload, use the guns on reload, and you want to be close to the enemy, which only presents more issues in a current meta, something like the hydroacoustic and radar meta, because you don't see a lot of carriers, so why are you taking defensive AA? Hydroacoustic and radar metas do hurt Gallant. Obviously, I don't really get that much complaining done about radar. I don't find it to be that much of a big deal. But it does make playing the Gallant in particular a lot more difficult. You've also got to remember that with other premium destroyers that focus very heavily on the close-range knife-fighting gunboat strategies, not Guider, I don't know why I mentioned that. Gallant, there we go, doesn't really have any of the tools that these are given in order to help her perform in this category. You got to remember that the Kid gets a heal party, which facilitates its gunfighting a lot better, and somewhat compensates for the fact that Kid only has one torpedo launcher with shitty torpedoes, and the Hyder gets a extremely long-range extremely short-range, extremely long-duration hydroacoustic, which also enables some close-range gunfighting. And these two ships, therefore, are much more effective at it than you. And, as I've stated many times before now, you are going to be fighting these ships because you are a Tier 6 premium, and you will face Tier 7s and you will face Tier 8. This particular game is actually pretty good matchmaking for me because I'm mid-tier, which you don't see a lot, but there were a lot of Tier 7s in the queue this day. It was kind of insane. I even got my Tier 9s down-tiered for a while. It was crazy. But, you can make Gallant work, but you are at the whims of the matchmaker. If you run into too many Hyders, you're useless. If you run into too many of the Kid, you're useless. Too many German destroyers, useless. You don't get the tools. And unlike the British destroyers that are actually going to be coming out, Gallant doesn't have a hydroacoustic, so you don't have that tool either. And really what this results to in the end is just a ship that's a bit meh. Honestly, if you're excited for British destroyers, and I know a lot of people are going to be, because British destroyers, obviously, it's the Royal Navy. Anything that happens with the Royal Navy, people are obviously going to be excited about, and then summarily disappointed. My English is really bad today, guys. I'm really sorry. Summarily disappointed when suddenly, British battleships happen and everybody wants them removed from the game because they promote all the wrong kinds of gameplay and take absolutely no skill. But I would recommend waiting. Wait for the Cossack, which is an amusing thing for me to actually say because Cossack used to be complete trash when it was first being tested. It looked like the biggest pile of shit. I remember watching a Notza video where he specifically called it the worst premium he'd ever tested. And, the guy's seen a lot of premiums. That's not exactly high praise for the Cossack there. And, of course, Notza being the main DD playing community contributor, I think, that you really see very often making content is, that type of criticism. I want to say criticism, but really it's just a no-holds-barred beatdown. But that type of criticism of the Cossack in its original form was poison to it. It killed any interest I had in it for sure. Because again, you've got a skilled destroyer player saying it's complete shit, and it was. It really was looking terrible. But Cossack's been changed quite a bit. It's still got its own issues, and people who are more focused on torpedo gameplay are going to enjoy the Gallant more than the Cossack. But to them, I would say you're in the wrong line anyway. Go play the Germans. But the Cossack is overall going to be a better premium. It's also going to be a Tier 8 premium, so your credit gain is going to be better, your Commander XP, all of that lovely stuff. It's all going to be better. And I'm actually getting in a bad situation here. I've run into, I think that's the Bliskovica over there, and there is, of course, a Fubuki or possibly an Akatsuki over there. And I can't tell which one's which, but the Shiratsu killed the Bliskovica, so it's a decent situation now. But like I was saying, the Cossack is just going to be better, and if you're waiting for the British destroyers, if they're the next line you want to take a look at, then I would still recommend waiting for the Cossack. It won't be fantastic, but it will provide you a much clearer idea of what the British destroyers are and how you should be playing them, because the Gallant really won't teach you that very much. Which is a shame, obviously. The Gallants, it was the first British premium destroyer, and everyone, well, the second, really, if we're going to count HMS Campbelltown, but she's a Tier 3, so she's completely irrelevant. The Gallant, everyone I think wants to be nice, but it's just not. There are a couple of things it can do well, but you're really looking at irrelevant things like maneuverability, and all destroyers are pretty maneuverable anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I don't have a lot of good things to say about the Gallant. You might have noticed it's a tier 6 destroyer, so I'm already going into a tier 6 destroyer review thinking this is going to be bad. How much does the matchmaker hurt it? Those are the questions, those are the things I say to myself when I look at a tier 6 ship to review, especially a destroyer, which, really do get hurt when they're bottom tier, especially if the enemy team is sitting on some higher tier destroyers as well. So those are the things I say to myself, it's a tier 6, it's going to be bad, but how badly does the matchmaker mess with it? Some ships like the Warspite or the Mutsu, certain bits about them, the good gun caliber on Mutsu, Warspite's ridiculous accuracy, they allow them to stand up fairly well in a situation where the matchmaker is stepping all over them. But the Gallant doesn't have any one particular thing that makes her, a special ship or a good ship. It's just there. It's a very average destroyer, standard destroyer consumables, and it's not all that impressive. So, compared to something like the, I'm trying to think of a tier 6 premium destroyer. I wish we had the T61. Oh, how I would recommend the T61, but that's not the point. Compared to a lot of other tier 6 premiums like the Warspite or the Mutsu, I would easily recommend both of them over the Gallant, because this really doesn't have a lot to set itself apart. It's just another destroyer. Very average, nothing too interesting, and it's a shame, because the Gallant deserves to be better. It does, It's a destroyer from a famous navy, a navy famed for having very good destroyer designs. The Tribals were some of, obviously, the best in the world. They were no Fubukis, but, what can you do? And it's just a shame that it's so bad. I do feel bad for people who want the Gallant to be more. However, I think at this point we all kind of know it's not going to be, and I don't think even the person who was requesting that I take a look at HMS Gallant was expecting me to be particularly praiseful. Anyhow, that's the game. It was pretty decent, but God knows this is about the best I could do with the matchmaker hurting me, so let's move on to the results. And here are the results. We're looking at 65,806 damage. It's not all that good, but Gallant is not all that good of a ship. 4 kills, even though I didn't do all that much damage to each individual target, of course. A lot of them were just one torpedo clipping the enemy and getting me the kill with it, which is fine, but, it doesn't exactly look that impressive on a results sheet. It's nearly 400,000 credits, though, a little bit over 4,000 XP and 208 free XP. Yeah, I can't recommend the Gallant, I really can't. There are some bits of it that I think, with that little bit of extra push, like if they made the concealment that little bit better, it only needs a few more 100 meters, or at an extreme about 600 to put it on par with the Kagero, that would be great. But it doesn't need much to make it good, it's just not got that little bit that it needs, and that is a real shame. I wouldn't be opposed to Wargaming coming back and taking another look at this like they did with the Prinz Eugen, although I think that's extremely unlikely even after the British destroyers are released. I don't think you're ever going to see any buffs to the Gallant. I think it's mostly a ship that people have just forgotten about, and with good reason really, because it's just not all that good, and it's not really all that special either. Anyhow, that was the HMS Gallant review. I'm trying to take a look at a few more ships at the moment. We've got Bliskovica on the list of things to do. I've got the Roma on the list of things to do, the Tirpitz. There's plenty of ships that I need to cover, and I'm trying to get video footage for, but it is taking some time, so thank you for your patience. Also, this is actually a couple days late, I think, this video, which is because I've had a lot of things going on in the house, and I really haven't been able to sit down and make the time for this. Also, I haven't been really that motivated to do so because Gallant is a terrible ship. Okay, not terrible, but it's pretty bad. And, I don't really enjoy looking at it because it's just not at all very interesting to me. Anyhow, with that being said, I do hope this informs, if you're thinking of purchasing the Gallant, I hope this informs you somewhat. Not a fan, would not recommend.